Low Fantasy Gaming is an RPG by Stephen Grodzicki. I'm reviewing the Deluxe Edition, which was published in 2019. The Deluxe core rulebook runs 287 pages, but is essentially a player's handbook, monster manual, and DM's guide all in one, which is to say, it packs a pretty full game in a tight package. It presents a medieval fantasy RPG that is somewhere between D&D 5e and OSR. It happens to bear a lot of similarities to 5e, so I'll mostly touch on some key things that are different from Hasbro's flagship RPG and share my pros and cons at the end of the video. The game lives up to its name of low fantasy in several ways. The first is by offering just a few humanoid races to play as: human, dwarf, elf, halfling, and a race called half-scorn. The Scorn are a sort of beastly proto-human. Like everything in this book, the race descriptions and their bonuses are mercifully brief. As for classes, there are 9. The really interesting bit here is that only 2 of the 9 are able to use magic, and that is because this game is structured for magic to be both rare and dangerous to use. The so-called magic user uses arcane sorcery, and the cultist uses divine blessings. The classes each have a bit of meat to them, with unique features described from levels 1 to 10. One fascinating aspect of leveling up in this game is that at levels 3, 6, 9, and 12, the players get to choose from a pool of dozens of class-agnostic features, each grouped into themes and tiered by power level. It's an interesting way to apply subclasses with minimal restrictions or fuss. There are 18 listed skills in the game, and you start with 6 or 7, your choices of which depending on your class. You pick up a new skill at level 4 and then at level 8. Skills do not have their own rating. You either just have the skill or you don't. When making normal checks in this game, you're rolling against your attribute, and if you have a skill that applies to the situation at hand, you just get a +1 to that check. That's it. Having a relevant skill will also allow you to tap into your reroll pool, which is a fairly generous meta currency that replenishes on rests, and it does exactly what you think it does. Allows you to re-roll on an attempted action, recovery rolls, and death checks. The game uses a roll under d20 paradigm, and most of the time you are rolling against one of your attributes. When a bonus is applied, such as the +1 from having a relevant skill, it is applied to your attribute, not your die result. That just comes with the territory for roll under. There are also rules for party checks and chases, but one standout mechanic that comes up frequently in this game is luck rolls. Let me back up for a second. There are 8 attributes for your character, 7 of which are probably quite familiar, but there's an 8th attribute called luck. Luck checks can only be made in the face of danger or attack. You start out with 10 plus half your level rounded up. When you roll for luck, you're trying to meet or be under your current luck rating plus any bonus. If you are successful, good things happen in that moment, but your luck rating decreases a point, making your next luck roll less likely to succeed. You get back 1 point of luck for each long rest. Along with the reroll pool, these are meta points intended to keep the players happy and the story moving along. Probably the most notable aspects of combat are the minor and major exploits. These are relatively loose rules that allow the player to come up with something creative in battle to roll on. For minor exploits, the PC must first land a hit, and then they roll against one of their attributes to pull off something extra, like a disarm or a tackle or something like that. For major exploits, the PC must first land a hit and then make a successful luck roll. The result should be more dramatic and advantageous than a minor exploit. There are also rescues, which occur outside of a player's turn, in which they have to make a successful dex and luck check to save an ally in the midst of battle. All these sorts of things epitomize the author's approach to the game, which is that it should be somewhat improvisational and loose. The book has plenty of rules that form a fully functional RPG, but the author suggests countless times that you can and should do whatever the hell you want. The game has one of the most straightforward death mechanics I've yet to come across. At half your HP, you gain the status of staggered, which triggers some features with some classes and some monsters. At 0 HP, you drop and go dark. It is only when another PC goes over to check your body that you then make a con check. If you fail this check, you're dead, period. If you succeed on this con check, you are just unconscious, and as long as there are no more threats around, another PC stabilizes you without any rolls. In 1d3 minutes, you gain 1 HP and you're up again. The only caveat to all this is that if you survive a 0 HP situation, you have to roll on the injuries and setbacks d20 table, which could leave you with a ruined limb or brain injury or other disfigurement. The game is generous to players regarding short rests, and although long rests give a tremendous amount of benefits, 1d6 days is a long time. From the looks of it, between all the reroll points and luck points and the easy short rests, the game doesn't seem all that gritty, as long as you don't try to cast spells. One of the keystones of low fantasy gaming is the behavior of magic. Only 2 classes of the 9 can cast it, and it only comes in 2 types, arcane and divine. There are a total of 120 spells, divided neatly into 20 spells for each of the 6 spell levels, and casters gain access to these along a convoluted Vancian schedule that any D&D player is familiar with. I actually asked the author why he included the non-linear character level to spell level table, and he provided the following reasons, and I'm paraphrasing here. These are fair points, and it will be useful for any stalwart defender of 5e as well, but for filthy casuals like myself, number mismatches and the spell level nomenclature are still a headache. As far as why magic is dangerous in this game, it's because every time a magic user casts, the player must roll a d20. On a 1, they must roll on the dark and dangerous magic table, which is a minefield of magical mishaps. If the player doesn't roll a 1 on that roll, then the next time they cast, a 1 or 2 will lead them to the dark and dangerous magic table. Then a 1, 2, or 3, and so on until they inevitably have to roll on the table. The mishaps table itself is a complete mix of good and bad effects, and many of the ill effects only have bearing on the RP side of one's character rather than on any mechanical performance factors, but a few are absolutely devastating. This whole system is similar for the cultist, who uses divine blessings instead of sorcery. Cultists can avoid rolling on the dreaded divine rebuke table by earning favor with their deity, but almost as often, they end up rolling on this table, which ranges from punishing to instantly fatal. The author does a fun thing with otherwise familiar spells by rebranding them with esoteric descriptive names. This does seem to breathe some new life into these spells, and the brief spell descriptions for each of the 120 spells is also most welcome. Surprisingly, the character creation and rules section of this book are only the half of it. The other half is a long list of GM tools that is particularly rich with tables. It's hard to summarize all of the content in the GM tools section. There is an extensive section on adapting the game to a pirate setting, another extensive section on mass battles, and a huge spread of NPC, encounter, and treasure generating tables. There's also a bestiary of many dozens of familiar monsters. It would have been cool to see these beasts all rebranded with the verbose, evocative names like the spells were, especially since most are not accompanied by an illustration. There is also an interesting section on exploration. Whereas some aspects of the game lean towards fast, easy play, this section swings the other way towards old school hex crawling. You're asked to worry about weather, the terrain underfoot, and travel encounters based on your terrain type. The sheer scope of the GM section makes the book feel like a very complete and usable game. Okay, so here are my thoughts on Low Fantasy Gaming Deluxe. Cons. It hurts to see spell slots. Well, more specifically, to see spells broken down by, quote, levels that don't coincide in any logical way with player levels. There are ways around this awkwardness, but it would, of course, take a lot of redesigning of the spells themselves. Roll under. It's kind of like that debate in video games where you either play with an inverted y-axis or you don't, and then you grab your friend's controller and they use the setting that's opposite of yours. Yeah, that feeling. Pros. Less magic is more. The punishing cast system makes magic much more special. Rather than spamming lightning bolt and counterspell, players are forced to think. Dynamic subclasses. They aren't really subclasses, but those unique features that a player earns at 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th level, pulling from a huge pool of class-agnostic abilities, that's just cool. It creates longevity in the game itself through increased replayability. Open game, open door. LFG is offered under an open game license and has built up a small but very creative community of fans. Furthermore, the author himself reminds the reader just to keep it loose. This game is definitely a hybrid of old D&D and new D&D with some grease thrown on the wheels to increase the fun. In other words, it just doesn't neatly fit into any category. But by its very nature of begging to be customized, it can be whatever game you want, just as long as you're okay with spells blowing up in your face. Thanks as always for watching, and let me know about your experience with Low Fantasy Gaming down in the comments. This is Dave signing off. See ya.